Welcome to our panel today, Smart Finance, Open and Virtual Banking, FinTech, Present and Future. Today we have a stellar lineup of speakers, including some of the movers and shakers from Hong Kong and internationally to share with us some of their insights. Without further ado, Urszula McCormack, one of Asia's leading blockchain and financial regulatory lawyers, is a trusted advisor to banks, FinTech firms, regulators, on matters such as licensing, new product launches, and regulatory compliance. Welcome, Urszula.
Hey, great to be here.
Great, looking forward to a great discussion. We have Pawel, Sobkow, a capital markets and cryptocurrency industry veteran, former CEO of Pinewood, the operator of Malta, Estonia-based BitBay, which is one of Europe's largest crypto exchanges. Good to have you here with us, crossing 7 hours of difference with Warsaw, Pawel.
Hi all, nice to meet you.
Nice, great. And then last but definitely not least, Alex Chen, CEO of Forum Syntron, a digital technology advisor who has helped virtual banks to build the bank, incumbent banks to change the bank, and also regulators with central bank digital currency. Alex was with IBM, where he led IBM services to banks. Welcome everyone, and I'm a professor of practice in FinTech innovation at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and a co-chair at the Hong Kong FinTech Association. Okay, so in the next 40 minutes or so, we'll discuss a number of items. Let's start with yourself, Alex. Having worked with a number of virtual banks, I believe our audience, and including myself, we would like to know, how are the virtual banks in Hong Kong going to compete and differentiate itself from the traditional banks, but also from other virtual banks in Hong Kong and internationally? Floor is yours, Alex.
Thanks, Lemon, and thanks for your question as well. With the introduction of 8 virtual banks into the market in Hong Kong, on top of the original 20 retail banks in Hong Kong, customers now have a much bigger choices. But then it's really a challenge to differentiate a bank from others in such a competitive market. So for virtual banks, they typically provide 3 value propositions to the client as compared to the conventional banks. First, they aim to provide a better client experience, not just the UI, but how to make banking simpler, faster, smarter, and safer. Second, the virtual bank leverages their cost advantage to offer more competitive products, like for more payment cash rebates, higher deposit interest rates, and lower lending rates. Third, virtual bank is good at focusing on their highly targeted customer segments and provide banking products and services, specifically addressing the needs of that particular segment. So in order to do so, they usually partner with relevant ecosystem partners to make the whole customer journey frictionless and enjoyable. This is a big contrast to the conventional banks, who are still pretty much product oriented or positioning themselves as a financial product supermarket. Among the virtual banks, it's still in the early stage of development, but we can start to see some of them put more efforts on the gamification and social elements to appeal to the younger customer segments. Some are building up a strong alliance with ecosystem partners to cover the daily lives of their target personas. And a couple of them specialized in serving the SMEs, which are very much underserved by the conventional banks.
No, great, thanks for sharing that. So it's good to know that virtual banks are leveraging their advantage. They are leveraging with their partners in the ecosystem. They are laser sharp focused on their target customer segment, using gamification to not really get market share, but also a hard share with the virtual banks. So maybe looking to the other side of the world, let's say, Pawel, with the COVID pandemic accelerating the adoption of the digital channels in Europe, and we've seen some of the digital banks come and go, like UK's RBS, the Bow Bank, they started but stopped very shortly. US, we have Simple. So it's not all glitter and glamour. We've seen some banks such as Ninja in Australia stop their business. But based on your experience from Europe and international, do you see are some of the lessons learned for the digital virtual challenger banks here in Hong Kong and mainland China and the rest of Asia? Any lessons learned from your side, Pawel?
Of course, the COVID and all, this, pandemic situation, of course, accelerated, many e-commerce businesses. But of course, this is also not the fact that all the digital and the neobanks are the winners, because we have, a lot of examples. Some of them was closed. Some of them, the valuation was, dropped very sharply. Very often the easy access to open a bank account, having a lot of different accounts in different banks, paperless, in a few minutes, KYC, all of these facts seems that this sector is very competitive. So in Europe, as an example, for example, the Revolut, which was growing very fast, which implement as a first much more competitive products and services, for example, opportunity to invest and buy the crypto, the most popular, like Bitcoin, Ethereum. Also possibility to invest in some stocks which are listed, let's say, in New York Stock Exchange, having, account in Revolut based in Europe. So if you compare, for example, Revolut to some other players in Europe, like German N26, like Monzo, and probably also, like some banks in China or in Asia, it's mean that you have to be very focused on user experience, focus on to implement and very fast and answer for demand of customers in different areas like investment, savings. Savings are more and more important. Some micro loans, the pay now, buy now, pay later services. Everything. You have to keep focus on customers. But in fact, this is the trend, and there is no discussion if the challenger and the neobanks will survive, because they will survive. They will be even stronger. But this is not the recipe that each of the challenger and neobanks will be the winner. You have to keep focus, as I said previously, on products and services more and more sophisticated.
Yeah, no. Thanks for sharing.
There are also some some other requirements, especially with the cooperation, to let's say to focus on some region, but with the global reach. But but this is like the separate topic, separate area of this business.
No, thanks for sharing that, the samples from Europe. And I guess in every market, every banking market is different, and we do see different pockets of revenue being challenged. Basically, for example, probably the holy grail in Hong Kong is more the wealth management part, whereas now we're definitely targeting deposits, accounts, payments, FX, etc. I mean, Alex, one of the questions I want to ask earlier was also around GBA. What are some of the opportunities and challenges that you are seeing for banks to expand into GBA? Probably one thing in mind is probably the customer onboarding challenges. I'm sure you know a lot about it with your dealings with the virtual banks, Alex. You're on mute, Alex.
Yes, sorry. I mean, it's a very exciting opportunity talking about GBA. The GBA presents a very attractive opportunity to banks in Hong Kong. With 70 million population, the GBA market is 10 times bigger than Hong Kong, and the GBA economy is growing so fast. One of the biggest opportunities is definitely the GBA Cross-Border Wealth Management Connect program. So it's supposed to allow investors in the Guangdong province and Macau to invest in Hong Kong's wealth management products and vice versa. In order to capture this opportunity, banks need to really understand the very different financial needs and also customer experience preferences between the southbound and northbound investors. But first thing first, they need to stay tuned for the final policy and guidelines, which are now being discussed and formulated among the relevant authorities in Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong's 9 cities. So you talk about customer onboarding. Right now, there's no one clear guideline how to onboard the customers for the banks in Hong Kong to onboard southbound customers and vice versa. And then today, the banks are also looking for the very from the authorities, what kind of investment products are being allowed in the first phase of deployment. But then after all, once it's being released, I think the banks are very, very exciting. They're very, very eager to capture that much bigger market in GBA.
No, perfect. No, thanks for sharing that, Alex. And I guess the virtual banks and the investors are probably watching this space very closely, which leads us very interestingly to the part around regulation that we have in each and every country. So we understand that regulations, they can both restrict and expand the future business of virtual banks. And maybe Urszula, from your dealings with regulators, with banks, what are some of the regulatory challenges and considerations that you're seeing that these virtual banks in Hong Kong have to take into account, and also with an eye to potential expansion into a GBA?
Yeah, well, let's try this one again, and hopefully I don't cut out. But look, so I spoke about a strong enabling environment, and what that means is really certainty. As Alex mentioned, around the issues that matter to virtual banks. And if we think about what it is that's important to virtual banks, and now really not just virtual banks, but any bank, is the ability to operate without a branch, the ability to connect with customers outside of that network without seeing them. So that remote onboarding environment, I just had a long conversation today with clients around how to make that work, particularly for overseas customers as well. But also virtual banks, specifically, in Hong Kong and in many markets, are tasked with focusing on some of the hardest segments, and that includes SMEs, it includes retail, and so they really need to be quite innovative about what they're doing. So they might pursue the sort of low-hanging fruit, the fast payments, the FX. But generally, we see the pursuit of the higher value, potentially higher risk products and services. So wealth was mentioned, but also things like supply chain finance. And of course, that brings its own sort of kettle of fish. Some also pursuing the crypto market, which is definitely coming, into the fore and becoming much more mature. But the other key aspects, the third one I would raise, is really about how they do their business. So the value proposition for a lot of fintechs is not just what they produce, but how quickly, are they enriching it anyway through things like the deployment of data analytics, AI, through the use of open APIs and so forth. And so that part where there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of setting standards, where there can be a reliance on, again, third parties on top of that, transfers of data across border, they're really needing to think about how they're setting up the governance for an area that is not yet well settled. Now, that is all possible. You can draw from principles that exist there already, but it generally requires some investment of time with regulators and to get them comfortable with what's being proposed, to demonstrate how the core principles of regulation are being addressed, and away they go. But the final thing I would just raise there is really about enabling that the lessons that have been learned to really move into other areas. And I think that's really the great opportunity that we have through the sort of COVID experience, is to be able to leverage these learnings into other business lines.
Got it. No, really thanks for also bringing up the point around governance. I definitely do think that the governance and risk management part is something that the virtual banks or any bank should look into when they expand. But that's one point. And the other point I do like is the part around enriching the experience of the customer using data analytics, but also how you govern that. So that's, thanks for sharing that. I guess that's probably an interesting debate with various regulators in Hong Kong and the GBA. I mean, probably also a last point back to Pawel. I mean, you mentioned Revolut. We've also seen banks like UK Sterling Bank that are using some interesting things. For example, they have a super app. They work with different apps that actually provide services to SME customers, such as accounting software and others, legal support, insurance. In fact, I'm seeing some of that, those super apps, but at the same time, I'm seeing banks also leveraging, providing banking as a service to other clients. Virtual banks that help other fintechs or other firms to provide the infrastructure. Anything you can share, Pawel, or yeah, anything you can share in that respect, Pawel?
Yes, this is this is like the additional trend, which I think it's visible in Europe last, let's say, almost 2 years. That a lot of fintechs they offer bank as a service platform. Why? Because it helps to manage sometimes like in the past payment service provider to grow up and start to offer some banking services. So this is something which for them is very easy. Of course, they will use their infrastructure, they relation with the banks. Why? Because by the end of the day, all fintechs, neobanks, challenger banks, despite the digital banks, because in my personal opinion, the digital bank is like the service which is offered in the digital form, but let's say traditional banks. But neobanks and challenger banks, there's a completely new entity without any IBANs, the accounts which was issued for them by central banks, etc. So it means that for the small payment service provider and the banking and financial platform, having this type of service, bank as a service, is very convenient and very easy access to develop, using, of course, the relation, the IBANs, money transferring on a global scale. So from this perspective, it's much more business which is focusing, let's say, B2B, because the end user and the customers is managed by, let's say, by this entity which will use this bank as a service opportunity. Yes, and this is also the trend, because a lot of fintech and even traditional finance company, which was engaged in this business for many years, they would like to also start be in this race for the fintech. So it will all of them. Of course, the API and all the system is very important, because this way you can find different partners who will deliver different types of services where they are specialized in. But generally, yes, this is very important actually, and help to build this sector in Europe here.
Got it. And thanks for that. I guess in my mind is also what about Asia? Maybe Ursa or Alex, is it allowed actually for these virtual banks to provide banking as a service? And have you seen them having these type of super apps? I know a number of questions all at the same time. And how any new developments related to Hong Kong MA's open API framework? I mean, I'm just looking at the art of the possible, I guess.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that there is so much happening in this region. I'm very excited about what is happening, because it's no longer just about Hong Kong, about Singapore, about Japan or Korea. We're looking at a lot of the emerging economies that are really building very good legal, technical infrastructure to be able to provide services in a different way, and really looking very forward thinking around how they want to set up their economies, their digital economies, their digital governments. And so I think looking at those markets is really not looking at those markets as followers anymore. We're really starting to see genuine innovation out of them. And I think amongst the batch of the digibanks in Singapore, I think we see perhaps a little bit more of those broader platforms, tech platforms, really moving into the financial services sector and seeing innovation from that angle. But I still very much see a division or a dividing line between those big tech platforms that really see themselves as moving into the financial services arena, and those that are very happy to remain as collaborators and platforms, and perhaps even just seeing how much they can take out of the financial zone, things around coordinating payments and things like that, without necessarily needing a license. So there is a little bit of a land grab around, around attention, around user engagement. But I think it's still a very active playing field. In Hong Kong, you asked about the sort of open API regime. We're still sort of seeing that plot along. It is taking a little bit longer than I think was expected. And just to recap, 4 stages in that approach. We're really only at the stage of being able to use the APIs through that model for providing information or to do things like onboarding, which is still great, but not yet in relation to setting some of that richer data that enables that sort of innovation on top of those services. So we understand that's all coming. It's all sort of grinding and working its way behind the scenes, but that formal framework still has a little bit of way to go.
No, thanks for sharing the latest development in Hong Kong and also bringing us that more APEC picture where big tech firms go into FinTech, into financial services, and a number of tech firms or FinTech firms are looking to find their own niche and grab find their own space. I mean, now moving also back to GBA, and I guess for a lot of GBA things, I'm looking at Alex. I mean, Alex, any examples or banks you see that are actually capturing a lot of these opportunities in GBA that we should know about?
Yes, I think, Lapman, we can see it's quite a number of successful cases that we can learn from. I think we can take reference of WeBank, which is now one of the most successful virtual banks in the world. WeBank now is having more than 200 million customers, and it becomes profitable in just 3 years' time. So they are so successful because of 3 factors. I think the first one is really they are part of Tencent Group. With that kind of like very good linkage with like Tencent Group, they can leverage the power of the WeChat social media platform, and most importantly, the data. So they can actually do very precise marketing. They can do very precise kind of credit scoring with all those very, very new alternative data from WeChat. I think this is one thing. And then the second one is really, they are very successful in building up the API economy. So, or more commonly known as embedded banking in mainland China. Actually, out of the 200 million customers, many of them actually they don't have a WeBank app. Many WeBank customers actually bank with the bank only when they are buying a car or renting an apartment. So WeBank fit in so well that they make that customer journey or the path purchase so frictionless, but then it's so powerful. They can make use of their channel partners to really reach out to the huge potential market that they want to target. So this is the second factor that make WeBank so successful. And lastly, they embrace collaboration with conventional banks so much. Instead of competing, WeBank actually partner with banks who have the capital and funding and know-how and also the network to really support WeBank's growth. I think this is really smart. When people are talking about the new entrants are going to disrupt the market, but actually when we look at people like WeBank, actually they want to collaborate so that they can make the pie bigger, so that they can really sustain their growth. So I think those are the 3 success factors that we can learn from WeBank when we're talking about how to capture the GBA opportunity.
No, thanks for sharing that. It's very interesting to see how WeBank is very subtly, smoothly working together with the traditional banks and well, being part of our being embedded in our daily lives with their financial services. And obviously good to hear that in 3 years they became profitable, because I do know, of course, with a number of virtual banks, the startup cost into tech, into talent is probably huge. Maybe going back to Pawel, because there are a lot of developments in Europe that are probably interesting for our audience here in Asia as well. I stand in Europe that in the cities the likes of Cyprus, Estonia, and Malta, they're vying with the likes of Switzerland to become a blockchain and crypto asset hub. I mean, we all know that GBA wants to also shape itself as a FinTech center with different cities playing different roles. Is there any lesson learned from maybe 2 or 3 things that regulators or players you need to take into account in building and positioning themselves as a FinTech center? And any lessons learned, Pawel?
Yes, this is the number 1 problem which I faced, and also many different companies which are dealing, let's say, in FinTech and in crypto space, is fact that despite the element that some local government wanted to be like the blockchain and FinTech island, that the regulators started to prepare the legal frame. Everything is, valid as enforced. then they will try to attract, fintechs and companies to move, to change the legislation, jurisdiction of the companies. But the one problem is the banking sector. Without cooperation, government, regulator, and the local banking system, there will be no winners. And this is why Malta failed, Estonia failed, some problem in Switzerland, Cyprus failed. So, my recommendation as a number one, for, GBA to be like the global leader is to offer for potential, investors there, not only the legislation, regulation, some clear rules of playing this game, but also relation with the bank system. You cannot keep focused on the business development if you are not sure that the banks will open the bank account for you, that they will offer you to do the services for different foreign currencies. And this is the most important. Actually, this is the biggest change for actual game. If anybody globally will present that in fact the collaboration with the regulator and the local bank system, it will be the winner. This is the first. Second thing is that also the bank system should be well developed. Why? Because, for example, in Switzerland, which are generally with roots with the banking system, they are not so well developed even as a Poland. So very, very, very often there is no API possibility. There is to transfer and withdraw the money. So if you have big scale and you have like the few thousand transfer to accounts 3 times per day, it will be impossible to do it with the Swiss bank because they are not ready. And the last thing is to offer by the local banks, for example, from GBA area, IBANs, which will be delivered by them, for example, for local companies, which do the service for them, let's say in Europe. Why? Because if I would like to be on board, let's say in FinTech or the crypto platform, which are based, let's say in Hong Kong, I would like to avoid situation that I will be transferring the money to IBAN in Hong Kong, waiting 2 or 3 days, because the time is the money. And when you will check, the prices of Bitcoins, it's sometimes the volatility is very high. So if you will offer me that your partner bank, let's say in Poland, will be this particular bank, and I can transfer the money in the next few minutes, my money which I transfer, I can observe in your platform, and I am ready to do the buying and selling, process. You will be the winner. So actually, I think that this is the most the biggest problem, but also this is the big chance for GBA to be in fact like the crypto and fintech friendly area globally. Because I'm sure that if it will be possible, many companies would like to be there. Because this is the most important fact now, the cooperation with the bank, not only the regulation. Because you can be regulated, you can fulfill all requirements, but without banks who will do the service for you, you cannot develop the business.
No, thanks for sharing that, both the practical side of things, but also the importance of collaboration with banks. And in my mind, it means that the regulator regulator and the ecosystem broader needs to think of different scenarios, ensure that there is, it's hard to ensure collaboration between the various parties to design for success, I guess. Alex, any additional thoughts on the topic of GBA as a FinTech center?
Yes, I mean, it's very clear that GBA is now being positioned as the global FinTech hub. That means we expect a lot of innovations coming out from GBA. And we also expect GBA to be able to connect really to the global economy. So it presents a very good opportunity. And then at the same time, we see some very encouraging progress that we are seeing will be evolving to be a major impact to the globe. Seeing Hong Kong MA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, now together with Bank of Thailand. And 2 weeks ago, People's Bank of China, PBOC, and UAE Central Bank, they all joined hands to conduct a central bank digital currency research and POC for cross-border payment. Now the project is being called MCBDC Bridge. So think about it. The 4 jurisdictions, the 4 economies all together, they represent more than 50% of Asia's economy. So the outcome of this project will be highly strategic to GBA as a global fintech hub. With MCBDC, we can do FX and cross-border payment between different countries, real time, and at a fraction of the transaction cost as of today. So we can expect new business models and product innovations to come along with such a breakthrough. I believe this project will have a great impact for GBA fintech development and in the region and globally. This is really big.
Right. No, that's really encouraging to see some of these innovative ideas coming out of the GBA and the coordination and the potential results this will lead into. I guess there will be a lot of work for consulting firms like yourself, Alex, law firms like yourselves, Urszula, and advisors like yourself, Pawel. Urszula, any comments from your side?
Yeah, look, I'd only add that, two comments. One is that to make lovely user experience, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So, what I would say is that when you see those announcements, and we've seen them from certain banks about the sort of GBA accounts or other services that work cross-border, behind the scenes is a great level of precision around making sure that the data requirements, the regulatory requirements, the funds flow requirements have all been mapped out. And there is a very intricate sort of web that sits behind all that you might not necessarily see. And it's good if you don't see it, because that means the user experience is successful. But I think not underestimating some of that work that needs to go in, but also knowing that it's possible. So I think sometimes people think, oh no, cross-boundary, cross-border, not going to work. But certainly we can see a lot of really great success stories. I think that the developments around the digital currency component are especially interesting. And I've long said that GBA is a perfect use case for something like this. We've got a cross-boundary and cross-border currency restrictions. And so that really lends itself to programmable money. And there are some genuine pain points and genuine opportunities in it. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out, because it'll also be relevant to other regions as well.
No, thanks for sharing that, Urszula. It's definitely good to also know it's not that just strategic part, but in the back, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that need to happen before we can have success. I think that leads us to probably the last 5 minutes of our discussion. And I guess we definitely, with each one of you, I could have a long fireside chat, and I look forward to do that in the future. Maybe very quickly before I stop. Any last 3 trends you're seeing, maybe in a hashtag, if that we're all on social media? What are your key 3 hashtags for the coming 12 months or so? Maybe Pawel first.
I think that the most important thing now as today is regulation and cooperation with the central banks. Why? Because central banks can offer you local IBAN, and this way you can be not focused on some area, but have like the global reach. And this is the most important, and will open the door for development. Many actually existing company in fintech space, but also the good opportunity to create the new one.
Got it. And in fact, Alex?
Oh yes, I think the first one is really hashtag CBDC, central bank digital currency. I can see a lot of potential with CBDC to really tackle the industry problems and also the cross-border kind of problem as well. So with the report coming in the second half, most likely from the regulators, I think we'll have a lot of insight. And then the participants, like the tech companies, the banks, they can also take reference of it, and then to get ready how they will make use of the new technology, the new regime, really to transform the business model. So this is one. And then the second one will be hashtag Wealth Connect. I do believe in the opportunity bring along from the GBA Wealth Management Connect, because we see a lot of demand coming from the growing middle class wealthy people in the North. So I think they have a lot of traction to really allocate some of their money to invest in other regions through Hong Kong. So it will give the banks in Hong Kong a much bigger opportunity to grow their business. So this is the other hashtag I want to talk about. And then the third one is really hashtag GBA. GBA, a big market to go.
No, perfect. Thanks. We'll watch that space for CBDC and the One Connect. Hopefully we'll see more clarity and opportunities for all of us. Last but not least, Urszula.
Yeah, okay. So my three are, first of all, coming of age. And by that, I mean, really bringing all of these really interesting innovations into the light under regulatory frameworks, into retail markets, with a really good glide path, ahead. Certainly some rocky roads along the way, certainly some market consolidation, some competition, of course, but that real coming of age of a lot of these super innovative projects. The second one that I have on my list, unsurprisingly, is regulation. So all things emerging, whether it's a DeFi project, whether it's the deployment of AI for risk modeling, credit, so forth, a lot of that really requires some really close collaboration with regulators and strong level of engagement from industry to set good policy around that to make sure that innovation continues, but it also still addresses the underpinning goals of regulations for sort of fair markets and fair treatment of people who participate. And then finally, digitalization. And I don't just mean that in terms of let's get on, a million apps, but really looking at how we're really capturing value, and whether that's, in quality content online, or whether it's in art that's in digital format and now expressed in an NFT. That digitalization drive is absolutely, central to growth and to really business as usual development. No one wants wet ink anymore. Everybody wants to see how they create their products and deploy their products, generate, transmit value, in a digital ecosystem.
No, thanks. This was really lovely. I mean, I guess for over the last 40 minutes, if I were to do some text analysis, I would hear words like regulation, opportunities, GBA. So I think probably the conclusion is probably that Asia is definitely a very exciting area, place to be for FinTech. There are opportunities, but at the same time, there are restrictions. And I think the players that can balance both and understand both, leveraging the expertise of each one of you, they will probably be the ones successful. So really thanks for this panel for being with us today. And thanks NextChain for inviting me for this. Looking forward to working with each and every one of you. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.